Great. Well, I want to welcome everybody for joining us today. I'm Vicki Walgass, president of the South Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. And then also with us, we have Kim Curtis, president of the Grandview Chamber. The two chambers are co-hosting this event today. Our sponsor today is Express Employment Professionals. They're located at 8423 Warnell Road. And unfortunately, Brad Collins, the owner, could not join us today, but I just wanted to share a little bit of information with you about their business. They offer a range of employment solutions for businesses, job seekers, including professional search, contract and temporary staffing, evaluation and direct hire, and flexible staffing. They staff industrial, commercial, skilled trades, administrative accounting, engineering, IT, healthcare, legal, sales, and human resources. So they do a wide variety of services. They expanded into South Kansas City about 8 years ago. They serve the Plaza, Brookside, Waldo, South Kansas City, Grandview, Belton, and Harrisonville areas. And Brad has been a franchisee for 20 years, so they've got a lot of great experience. So if you're looking for staffing for your organization, please check them out. And they can be reached at 816-994-6894. Again, just want to welcome everybody for joining us today. We're here today to have a conversation about how COVID-19 has impacted development across the state. And with us today are speakers I'll introduce shortly, but if you have questions as we go through the program, please put those in the chat and we'll make sure we get those to our panelists as we go through the program. Our first speaker today will be Rob Dixon. Rob is the director of Missouri Department of Economic Development. Before becoming director, he served as president and CEO of the Missouri Community College Association. He has also served in a variety of roles at the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, with his overall responsibilities including leadership management of staff and programs in economic development and workforce development, public affairs, local government policy, communications, community development, and strategic planning. And prior to that, he served as the Hollister Area Chamber of Commerce Executive Director. And then he also was a member of the U.S. Marine Corps. He joined after high school, where he served as an intelligence analyst in Afghanistan and Pakistan immediately following 9/11. Following Rob, we will have Tim Cowden. Tim is the president and CEO of the Kansas City Area Development Council, where he has worked for the past 22 years. Tim began at KCADC as a senior vice president of business development and was promoted to president and CEO in 2015. He has nearly 3 decades of experience in economic development and corporate recruiting, having held senior positions at the community and regional level. Tim works closely with economic development partners across Missouri and Kansas, covering 18 counties and more than 50 communities. So Tim is going to give us an overview from a more regional perspective here locally. Our next speaker will be Mark Long. Mark serves as president and chief executive officer with Newmark Grubb Zimmer, where he is responsible for the leadership of one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the Midwest. Mark was recognized by the Kansas City Business Journal as one of the top CEOs to watch in the U.S., and he maintains his brokerage practice as one of the region's most active real estate professionals. He's been involved in more than 1,100 transactions representing more than 15 million square feet of industrial, medical, office, and retail space. And he's been with Newmark Grubb Zimmer since 1995, following graduating from Rockhurst University. And then our final speaker will be Owen Buckley. Owen began his career in 1985 as a retail leasing agent with one of the nation's largest shopping center developers of its time, Leo Eisenberg Company. In 1992, he joined Kansas City's R.H. Johnson Company, where he continued to specialize in tenant representation and development before becoming president in 1998. In 2006, Owen founded Lane 4 Property Group and assembled an experienced group of industry veterans. Lane 4 has quickly emerged as one of the most active commercial real estate companies in the Midwest, with their tenant representations, project leasing, and over $500 million of completed development and acquisition of properties over the past 8 years. So we have a very knowledgeable panel of speakers today, and thank you all for taking the time out to join us. We really appreciate being able to hear your input. And with that, we'll begin with Rob Dixon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be a part of this panel and do it alongside my friend Tim Cowden. Haven't had a chance to see Tim obviously in person, but I can see from the picture it looks like he shaved his goatee. Is that true, Tim?
You know what? It's true, Rob, and it took my wife 2 weeks to notice that. So thank you, honey. I appreciate you.
It looks good. You look great. No, but seriously, Tim is an awesome role model and an awesome leader. Has been a great mentor for me in a variety of ways in my time as a director here. So appreciate the chance to join everybody today and go forward from there. So hopefully up on the screen you can see our slide presentation. Today is actually a really important day, and it's also timely as it relates to our state's overall economic recovery. I'll be joining Governor Parson this afternoon to announce kind of the next phase of our Show Me Strong recovery plan, and wanted to talk through that a little bit with you today, but really to just sort of level set on where we are in our state's economy. So if you go to the next slide, please. As we've talked about it, our state's economic recovery and the healthcare response are inextricably linked. They're two sides of the same coin. And the only reason why we're able to move forward in our economic recovery is because we've built a solid foundation on the healthcare side. So this depiction here, is kind of intended to be a little bit figurative, but a little bit literal as well, in that the 4 pillars that you see, testing, PPE, hospital capacity, and the ability to use data to predict kind of the future course of the virus, is what allows us to safely return to economic and social activity in our state. So our economic recovery effort is really built on those four columns, and you'll hear the governor talk a little bit more about the success that we've had on that. But then you can see the business, community, citizen, and infrastructure tabs across the top, and that's really how we're framing up the actual recovery work. We think that there are specific items in each of those categories that require different public policy tools, different and specific attention items as this goes forward. We do not believe that just because we're able to reopen the economy, that doesn't mean the virus goes away. Everyone has talked about this quote unquote new normal, so I don't mean to buzzword you, but we do believe that that's the era that we're in, and we're gonna have to operate, and businesses are gonna have to operate in that function. So let's go to the next slide, if you could, please. And wanted to just throw this out there real quick as a resource for businesses. We've got on this website, showmestrong.mo.gov, and you can see that we have some testing resources available for businesses. I do believe that this is going to be something that the private sector is going to have to do a lot more, frankly, than currently is happening on the testing front. Testing, as the weeks and months are progressing, is going to become cheaper, we believe, as well as more accessible, and also the technology is going to be easier. Don't mean to be too crass here, but going to go from the nasal swab to being able to spit in a cup and really get a much faster turnaround time. The reason that that's important is because then employers can really have a hard understanding of what is happening with the virus in their own workforce, but also communicate that to their customers. And ultimately, that exchange between the business owner and the customer is what's going to allow folks to have that confidence to return in the economy. So with that, just let's get into where things stand real quick, and I'll kind of run through some data. If you can go to the next slide. Unprecedented, if you can keep going, Ashton, thank you. So just kind of a quick overview here of where things are. The purple line is Missouri, the yellow line or gold line is Kansas City, and the gray line is the U.S. average. So right now, the U.S. average is somewhere in that 14% range. Statewide, we are basically just under 10% unemployment, and KC Metro is just over 10% unemployment. So these are, by any stretch, kind of at the historic high level of anyone in our lifetime, in our generation. Missouri's peak from the Great Recession back in the 2008, 2010 era was at 9.7. So we're right at that level right now. So obviously huge hole to climb out of. There's lots of noise in the data, but this is where it is right now. If you go to the next slide, please. And this is why. This is kind of the inverse of that. This just shows you the literal cliff that has fallen off. These are job losses on the Missouri side of KC Metro. The state line looks exactly the same, but obviously the numbers are bigger. And this is what happens when economic activity just shuts off overnight. Job losses were really concentrated, I'm sure, as you know, in leisure, hospitality, manufacturing, and retail, but it truly was across the board. Missouri as a whole lost somewhere to the tune of 300,000 plus jobs almost overnight. So unprecedented, the depths of it, whatever you want to call it, it's a pretty tough situation overall. But next slide, if you could. We're starting to see some signs of recovery coming up here soon. And this is actually kind of one of the first ones. So what this is showing you is the initial unemployment claims. So these are people who are filing for unemployment for the first time. And it's trending downward. You could see the peak of it was when we were still climbing up that the curve line on the virus, kind of mirrors that. But we are starting to see it level off. And the U.S. Numbers just came out today. 1.5 million Americans filed for unemployment for the first time today, and but that number is declining. Right now, we've got about 350,000 Missourians are on unemployment. Normal times, it's about 20,000. So it's just a tremendous shock to the system. Next slide. Again, you can kind of see where the impact has been, but this is what I say, that you're starting to see some signs of hope here. On the right side of the column, that's positive jobs that are added. The left side is jobs that are still shedding. But over the last month, these are nationwide numbers, about 1.2 million jobs coming back in leisure, hospitality, which is really important for tourism, obviously. And the parts of our state that have been hardest hit have been, frankly, Branson area on a per capita basis, where our tourism economy is really focused. So signs of life here. One thing I would note, the health services line here includes a lot of non-hospital medical services like dentists and things like that. A lot of that number is actually driven by kind of the return to some degree of normalcy in that industry as well. Next slide. Again, just real quick to show you, kind of here, this is a small business, hours worked in a small business. They dropped, the gray line is U.S., lost nearly 60% of the hours worked in a small business at the depths of this thing. Missouri is the blue line. We were down around 50%, but again, trending back up. You could see the impact of different public policy interventions, both on the downward side as well as the upward side as well. So again, we're right now in Missouri just about 23% down of where we were before this started, but that's still, again, moving in the right direction. So this means people are getting back to work. More people are working in small businesses. Next slide. Same kind of concept here, but this is earnings. And obviously, more hours worked means more earnings in small businesses, and a good sign. Next slide, please. And this is same data, but includes Kansas City metro area. You can see, again, the impact here. Basically a decrease of about 31% from January in terms of earnings in small businesses. I know it goes without saying for this audience, but small businesses truly are the backbone of the economy. 80% of the jobs in our state are in small businesses, so pretty big impact. Next slide, if you would. This is another one of the good signs here, and I promise I'm getting to the end of the data just for your own edification. The yellow line shows the number or the percentage of small businesses that reporting a decrease in revenue from the week prior. So basically what we're seeing is fewer businesses are saying that they lost money compared to last week. And if you actually go back to the beginning of May, this was up near 75%. So right now, we're seeing that small businesses are increasing or maintaining their revenues. So really important metric overall. Again, it's a bit of an inverse type measure, but it's going in the right direction. Next, please. And then the same thing here for Kansas City area. Small businesses are slowly starting to see that increase in their revenue. Next. This one is really about consumer spending overall. And interestingly, Missouri is just about back to where we were on consumer spending. And this is inside these numbers is a wide variety of disparity. So, for example, in the tourism, I mean, again, in the tourism related and hospitality related spending, really still down, but grocery in particular is up significantly. And so when you net all that out, we're down about 3%. But you can see where we were at the depths of this back in early April in particular. So consumer spending, not only is that a big part of local government revenue, state revenue, it's actually one of the biggest drivers in the overall economy and the GDP. So getting people back out shopping is extremely important for our overall economy. And I promise my last data slide here coming up next, just showing you on commercial traffic. So the black line across the middle is sort of where we were, just it's the baseline. And then you could see the decrease in commercial traffic. Obviously, this is a measure of goods and services coming into and out of our economy. And you see how far down they were. The gold line is Kansas City. The gray line is St. Louis. So you guys are just kind of tracking along with the state and with St. Louis in that regard. But we're just now about back to where we were in terms of commercial traffic. So pretty amazing if you look at the depths of this. If you go to the last slide, pretty amazing overall, where if you think about what as a state and as individuals, what we've all gone through, we are seeing us climb out of the hole. But again, I would just note that we've got a long way to go, and we are going to be feeling the impacts of this for a while, just as the financial reverberation, certainly the state budget, local government budgets, not the least of which the individual Missouri citizen and our employers are still going to be dealing with this, just the fallouts of it. But it does look like we have hit the bottom. The only way we're going to continue to fight the virus off is to continue to mitigate, regardless of the lifting of restrictions or anything like that. We need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, our employees, and using some of those best practices. So I'm going to leave it there, and I appreciate the time, and I know we'll have some time for questions in a bit. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Just a reminder, if you do have questions, put those in the chat, and we can get to those as we go. Next, we'll hear from Tim Cowden. We'll have Tim talk to us a little bit from a regional perspective.
Vicki, thank you for having me. And I want to say hello to Mark. I see him, and Owen. Good to see those guys. And Rob Dixon. I think everyone, after hearing Rob go through that PowerPoint deck, he gives everyone so much confidence. He has a call every Friday afternoon, I think it is, and I've been able to do this once or twice and listen in. But as you mentioned, Vicki, Rob was a Marine, and he has attacked this whole COVID-19 pandemic, this disaster that we're all working through, just like he did when he was serving our country in the Middle East. So I appreciate the leadership that Rob provides
Thanks, Tim.
in organization.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. As it relates to the region, I don't have slides to give you data. I'm going to give you some anecdotes as it relates to our organization and what we're seeing. So when we went into this, into the stay-at-home, 12, 13 weeks ago, I had questions from my team, from our customers. What's this going to do to our client deal flow? I mean, is it going to be completely shut off? How are we going to work through this? And I'll tell you, since early March, we've opened up 22 new recruitment projects that are evaluating the Kansas City region. Now, the vast majority of these are in Mark's space, in the industrial and e-commerce space. And you all know Chris Gutierrez and Ellie Bowen. They have been doing a terrific job of working any number of these deals. Again, 22 since early March. Our office deal flow has really tailed off. And Owen might touch on some of this later, but leaders in the office industry, and I'm trying to do it. How much office space are we going to need? How much space will people need? How's the office going to look? How's it going to be laid out? So there's a lot of questions in that area that nobody can really answer at this time. If somebody says they can answer them, I'd really take a hard look at that answer before you really believe it. But I don't think anybody knows. But as getting back to the positives of what we're seeing, e-commerce. I don't know if you saw just yesterday on the other side of the state line out in Edgerton, Dots Pretzels announced, I think, nearly a 200,000 square foot distribution facility. They're going to create, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 jobs, something. But food-related activity, e-commerce activity is incredibly strong right now in Kansas City. And I know Rob and his team have been involved with our team on a sizable project that we hope to announce real soon in our region that I know will put a lot of smiles on folks' faces on this call. So we're excited about how Kansas City is faring and competing in this new dynamic that we all find ourselves in, and our strengths with logistics, transportation, e-commerce, all those are really coming to bear now. And I think as we move forward out of this into the now normal or the next normal, to use the buzzwords, I think we're going to be really well positioned. Let me take that a bit further. If you look at what's happened on either coast, particularly in New York, it's tragic what's happened there. And they're just coming out of their stay at home and quarantine now. As it relates to density, where are people and where are companies going to want to be in the future after having lived through this pandemic? And then you factor on costs and all these things that these folks have been dealing with in these areas on the West Coast and East Coast. We believe that Kansas City now has an even better opportunity to position ourselves for success moving forward. If you recall, we laid out our Casey Hartland campaign, the regional branding campaign last November. It's perfectly situated with some tweaks to move forward and message to these areas. We were already focused on Seattle, focused on Chicago. We're positioned ready, and I'm excited about the work that my team is doing right now to get us there at the right time, because you don't want to move too early until you know exactly or have a better feel for how the market is going to react. But really good work being done there. And I'm going to leave it with this, and I'll turn it over to Owen or Mark, whoever's going next, is my team. Everyone on this call can understand what I'm going to say here. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety that all of us still have. But think back 12 weeks ago and how much we had as we went into this. A lot of uncertainty. How would our teams perform? How would we serve our customers? Would we have any customers? Our team has stepped up in a big way, and they've met the challenge. They're overcoming the challenge. And I appreciate the fact that many on this call invest in my organization and allow us to do what we do. And I know that you would share my pride in the work that's not just being done at KCADC or in Rob's group or all the other economic development groups on this call. I saw Kim Curtis. That's what we're here to do. This is our time. This is why we have economic development. We have economic development organizations, because we're going to need to be at the fore to come out of this on the other side and lead our communities, lead our region, lead our states to regain prosperity. So I look forward to questions that might come up later, and I appreciate the opportunity to share the time, Vicki, with the panel.
Thank you, Tim. I have a quick question for you. So you talked about having a number of new inquiries coming in through the past couple of months. What about ones you were already working on when COVID-19 came about? Did they put stuff on hold, or are they continuing to move forward, or what are you seeing there?
There's one in particular. They've used their name, but I'm uncomfortable using the name on this call because I don't know who's on it. They were prepared to make a decision on a multi-$100 million investment right before we went into this pandemic and the shutdown. We thought, okay, that deal isn't going to move forward. They've continued to move forward. They're in a industry that is e-commerce related, so they've seen a significant spike in that business. Now they also have the brick and mortar retail as well, and that has been hurt. They're moving forward. it's going to happen. It's even more important for them to be positioned in our part of the world in Kansas City than ever before. On the office side, we have seen a lot of our deals just say, hey, we don't know what's going on. We're going to have to work through this. We don't know. It's on hold. It's interesting, and I'll shush. The first couple of weeks of the shutdown or the stay at home, we saw a real flurry of activity on the office side. New deals, projects that we had been working, they said, oh yeah, we're going to move forward. And then it was like, boom, it just stopped. So it just depends upon the company itself, the leadership at the company, how forward looking they are, how strategic they are. Companies that are looking quarter to quarter and short term, yeah, I don't put much stock in them coming back anytime soon. But the companies that are really taking a strategic look at this and looking long, I think Kansas City's in a great spot. And some of those will come back. And I think you'll see some pretty significant announcements over the course of the next 2 to 3 months on projects that a lot of us on this call have been working on. And I'm excited about that.
That's great. That is exciting, for sure. Well, thank you, Tim. We appreciate it. Next, I'm going to move to Mark Long. Mark's going to talk to us a little bit about development from the industrial side and what they're seeing here locally.
Super. Thanks, Vicki. And thanks to Vicki and Kim for this event. I really enjoy the work that you guys have done and have had a great relationship with Owen and Tim. And so I can hardly keep a straight face looking at these two via this Zoom call. I'm delighted to share some perspective. I would say that, economic in general takes a lot of energy and effort and people. I mean, you sometimes get done with a deal and you kind of retrace all the phone calls and communication that you have and all of the meetings that you have, frankly. And it certainly has changed here since we've, been dealing with COVID. And I would say that I think this whole time, but just before I get into talk about Vicki, I might just touch on that economic development concept and this idea of working from home. And this isn't because I advocate for commercial building owners, because we also advocate, and counsel people on how to, set up their space for the most appropriate space for their workforce. But think about doing economic development where you don't bring the person to Kansas City. They don't smell the barbecue. They don't see the people. They don't interact. They don't smile. They don't get a sense for what we are all about. To do. So Owen and I were visiting before we got started. We were both fairly early getting back our workforce back into the office, and I've really been happy to be back with our team and just interact, share notes, collaborate, all of those buzzwords that kind of went away, along with this idea of culture. And I kind of was one of the advocates for working from home, and now I really like working at the office. I think to Tim's point, I kind of relate this to what we dealt with, a really significant tragedy, totally differently, but when we all dealt with 9/11. And there were things like insurance. We didn't have terrorism insurance before. Right now, we really weren't insured correctly, and our leases didn't read appropriately for a global pandemic. We are negotiating leases now that include that language. Certain things stuck for 9/11. We travel differently today. All sorts of things stayed with us that we learned from 9/11, but several things didn't. I remember having calls with people that owned commercial office buildings that were towers, and there was some question as to whether or not we'd ever rent buildings that were more than 3 stories. And obviously some of that changed and some of it didn't. So I think all of that means is that we're going to be busy as commercial real estate experts and economic developers dealing with the change coming along with this. I did have a couple of statistics that I thought I might just rattle through. When we started our work from home 16 weeks ago, or excuse me, March 16th. 13 weeks. I'm losing track of time like everybody else. Time doesn't mean anything anymore. We have done 79 transactions within our firm since we've been in COVID. Compared to last year during the same time, we did 130. So transaction volume is certainly down. And I think the other thing that is down is a lot of those transactions that we've done, Tim, to your point, people don't really know. They need a little more certainty to make major investments. So a lot of those transactions that we have completed have been shorter term, less commitment in less investment. So I think that we're doing a lot of that patchwork stuff. I did have another statistic that I thought was important. We manage about 11 million square feet of buildings in and around Kansas City. That's over 200 tenants. In April, in a normal month, we collect about over 95% of their tenants pay on time. I mean, it's just that's about what our tenants our percentage of payment is. In April, 80% paid. In May, 85% paid, and in June, it looks like over 90% paid. A lot of that certainly is the PPP revenues that have helped small business owners afford their rent. We certainly expect that the numbers that Rob showed will pan out for small business owners as well, and that trend will be towards profitability. And as PPP runs out, we expect July to be a good month as far as our tenants' ability to pay rent. On the industrial market, I think there's a couple of angles to discuss. One is the investment market. The investment community has been on another whirlwind. Tim, I really appreciate your comments about the gateway cities and how they've really been affected. And as I talk with my associates in gateway cities on the East and West Coast, they have been impacted in a much more significant way than we have. Talk to somebody that call your friend that offices in the Willis Tower, and they take a train to get there. They take an elevator to get to the second lobby and another elevator. Those people are really struggling and really have a hard time creating a safe work environment. Where Owen Buckley and I have the same environment, Tim, so do you. We can walk in our office building, touch one doorknob, and walk up the stairs, never touch anything, and be in all types of space and maintain social distancing and really feel safe. So as people are looking at investment alternatives, the investment not only in industrial real estate makes a lot of sense, but industrial real estate in the Midwest and specifically Kansas City. And there were things we used to talk about all of the time in Kansas City that we sort of got away from. And that's things like being within a 2-day truck drive of 88% of the US population. That was exposed, where if you had a malfunction or you had a distribution center shut down that was on one of the coasts, you had a real struggle maintaining any type of ability to distribute your product in a timely fashion. So the investment market, we've had 2 major investment sales close for industrial projects in Kansas City post-COVID, and with really no penalty compared to pre-COVID pricing. So we're really excited and enthusiastic about that. And we see that trend continuing. The other thing that I think, as you talk about the industrial real estate market, in addition to investment, is development. And we've been fortunate. We have delivered over 5.5 million square feet of Class A industrial building to the Kansas City market over the last 8 or 9 years. That's a lot. I mean, that stacks up favorably to any other city, and absorption has closely followed that, meaning that as those buildings have been built, there's been demand for it and they've been rented. We have a very strong industrial development community in Kansas City. Some of the top industrial developers in the country are here. And not only as a result of our transportation and where we are in proximity to the US population, but also as a result of that demand, they are adding developments into Kansas City that they've agreed to post-COVID. So we are going to continue to see the product being delivered, which it's no different than having, on the shelf of a grocery store. I mean, if you don't have it there, it's hard to sell. And so as we will have more and more industrial product, there will be more and more buzz and more interest in industrial users coming to Kansas City. And I think that is a trend that is not going to change anytime soon. So we're very excited about that. There are certain companies that are absolutely thriving in this environment. You kind of have seen the entrepreneurial spirit surface in this era. And then there are certain businesses that are really struggling in this environment. What we are seeing a lot of, Tim mentioned 3PL. I would really call that omni-channel retail, where people are figuring out different ways to get their product to their consumer. And we are, obviously, we're seeing people take down industrial buildings to help with the delivery of that product. The other statistic that I think you've probably heard quite a bit of, when we went into COVID, about 14% of sales were e-commerce sales. We've heard numbers that those will be as high as 52% as you continue to study and analyze those. And I think a lot of people, like my mother, who didn't have an Amazon account before COVID, has one now and has learned how easy it is, to do certain types of online shopping that they maybe didn't have comfort with before. As a result of that, that will be more demand. The other thing that people, I'm sure, have heard about and are continuing to talk about, but will absorb a lot of space, is this idea of safety stock. Several people were managing their inventory levels so precisely that they didn't manage in enough inventories for problems. And so we're referencing this as safety stock. And safety stock may account for as much demand over the next 4 or 5 years as e-commerce would have on its own. So we have all of this demand, all of these macro trends working in our favor in the industrial business, along with a really good strategic central location with transportation infrastructure that you can't duplicate. So I would say that we are really looking forward to some of our clients, getting back into a mode where they've got a little bit of vision into where their business is going and making commitments. And we see real opportunities and real, I think, good things coming for the industrial market in Kansas City.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
We do have a couple of questions, but I'm going to go ahead and go on to Owen, and then we'll do questions after he's finished. Owen Buckley, thank you for joining us. I know you do a lot in the office and the retail spaces. Tell us what you're seeing there.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Kim, and everything you do for South Kansas City. What's been going on there over the last 5 or 6 years is amazing and needed. You've got so much momentum, so we'll despite COVID, we'll keep that momentum going. For those of you who may not know me or my company Lane 4 as well, we are kind of initially, especially myself, is really retail people, retail commercial real estate. I've been in the commercial real estate retail industry for 35 years in Kansas City. So it's been just amazing to watch retail change. And I can remember going back 25 years ago when Builders Square and Home Quarters. Remember them? We're replacing kind of mom and pop hardware stores, and then all of a sudden Home Depot and Lowe's replaced those two. And one thing that I've always said in serving retailers is, man, I'm glad I'm not a retailer, because their business changes so fast all the time, every 5 years. You know, look at Main Street USA was replaced by Walmart. The pet store, the small electronic shops, back, at least when I was growing up, were replaced by Best Buy and Petco and PetSmart. The stationery shop, you know, replaced by Office Depot. The mall has changed. You know, we used to love being able to shop indoors in the cold, and in the hot summers here in Kansas City, we could go to Metcalf South or Oak Park. That was the thing for many years, and that was replaced by lifestyle centers that we want to be able to pull right up to the store and walk right in to the store. I'm busy. I can't walk by 12 other shops. So that changed. The big power centers started picking away at Macy's and Dillard's and the Jones store, and started basically taking departments within those department stores and opening up an Office Depot or a Bed Bath & Beyond. So you see my point is that things continue to change. While we've seen a lot of deceleration in a lot of things, particularly the economy and jobs and things like that over the last 3 or 4 months, we've seen an acceleration in many retailers having to adapt. Many retailers probably accelerating their demise, meaning some of the retailers that have been hanging on, think Sears. I mean, how long has Sears been hanging on? It goes back 15 years, you know. It's like, wow, you know, you thought they were going to be gone any minute 15 years ago. And so I think with some of these big retailers that probably should have been gone at least 1 or 2 years ago and probably had another 5 to 10 years left, are going to be gone quicker. We're seeing some of them take bankruptcy. Many of them are taking Chapter 11 bankruptcy and probably should just relieve all of us and take Chapter 7 and call it a day and move on, because they haven't kept up. They haven't improvised. Retail changes all the time. So I think that's a real big thing for COVID-19. And what we're seeing at Lane 4 is some of these big junior boxes and big boxes, we're already making big changes technologically. You know, Mark mentioned the omni-channel, meaning your omni-channel, you're more than one channel, you're brick and mortar and you're online. Those are the people that are going to survive. So retail continues to change. We do a lot of work with what I would say are retailers, but they provide services. They don't necessarily sell shoes or shirts or dresses. They might sell hardware, but a lot of them sell yoga. They might sell State Farm insurance. They might sell food, as in a grocery store or a restaurant, or coffee. They might sell haircuts. So we've been really concerned about a lot of those because they're small businesses, and lots of them are mom and pops. Even if it's a national company, it might be a franchisee, which means really that's a mom and pop. And when we started all that, and it's been mentioned here by several of the speakers, you know, I think back in March, and all of us were deer in headlights. I mean, we were all like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And I agree with, I think, Tim, you mentioned the perseverance, and that people just, you know, they get creative, and that's what's happened, including our government with the PPP program. I will tell you, in March, I didn't think very many of my retailers would pay April rent. And PPP came out, it came out quick, and it gave a lot of people hope, and I think was huge, and continues to be huge. So we've been very proud. Our percentage of people paying rent are very similar to what Mark just mentioned. Now we'll see where that heads as they're opening back up. Hopefully we won't have another spike or surge. That's of course the big question out there. It costs a lot of money to start up after you've shut down. It costs a lot of money to shut down, but it costs more money to start back up. So we don't want to see this thing get shut down again. And that's probably the biggest thing that we're crossing our finger on. Slowly but surely, as Rob mentioned in his PowerPoint presentation, that every week we talk to our tenants and things are getting a little bit better every week. And so we just hope that continues. The other really interesting thing is just how much they've innovated. You know, we saw the drive-throughs and the takeout and pickup. In fact, we pushed several municipalities and projects that we work on to allow us to do more drive-throughs and pickups for not just restaurants, but for general merchandising, you know, retail stores, because that's the future. Ordering stuff online and boy, what someone asked the question, what's a lasting effect of COVID-19? I saw pop up, and that definitely is one. People, it's kind of like when you're getting in a taxi and you're talking on the phone, and then the taxi gets to your location. You have to dig into your purse or your billfold and get your credit card or your money out and stop your conversation. With Uber, you just get out of the car. And it's the same thing when you go to pick up food at a grocery store or these restaurants. You've already got the app. I'm probably going to gain about 10 pounds because I'm right above Shake Shack. And during this COVID-19 thing, I finally downloaded their app. And so I sit in my office and order one of my cheeseburger and French fries. and in 10 minutes later, I just walk downstairs, pick up my bag, and walk back up. It's paid for, it's everything. So that's so convenient. It's kind of like getting out of that Uber car and keep talking on the phone. So we're going to see a lot of that. I think it's going to be a big plus for a lot of these restaurants and just general retail. You know, as far as the office, you know, we don't do a lot of office. We do a little bit. I certainly work in an office. I am in charge of a team. I think there's got to be something about being together. You know, these Zoom calls are great, and talking on the phone is always great. But a couple of things. There wouldn't be so many business books written over the last 50, 60 years. And what are those business books mostly about? Motivation, teamwork, you know, how to build that. Can you imagine trying to start a company where everybody's in their family room and they don't get to know each other's quirks and personalities and strengths? And I, you know, it's one thing for our sales team here at Lane 4, we've already all knew each other. We knew each other's characteristics and traits. That's one thing when we're all scattered around for 2 or 3 months. It's another thing if we're trying to start a new project and we're scattered around, or start a new company where we don't know each other. So I think that's going to be really important in training people. It's hard to do on a phone or a Zoom. So I think office will be fine. I do think maybe it'll be, as Tim mentioned, you know, it's still, you know, to be seen, but, you know, maybe it's going to be laid out a little differently. Certainly some people are still going to be able to maybe not take as many trips to San Francisco to see that client. Maybe it's, you know, 2 trips instead of 6. But yeah, I think you're still going to have to get on planes and go see people, particularly when you're competing. And if you think you can get the job on Zoom and your competitor goes personally to their office in San Francisco, you're going to probably start traveling more. Nobody likes to get beat. So I don't know. I still, there's a lot of positives that are going to come out of this. Our country in particular, human beings, you know, but our country in particular, we're known for our innovation. And I think we're just beginning. This COVID-19 is just beginning. We're seeing some of the innovation coming from the COVID-19 just now. I think we're going to see a lot more of it in the next year to 2 years. So.
Right. I know I like to be in the office, so I need that people interaction as well. Well, thank you, Owen. Okay, so if anybody has questions, please put those in the chat. We do have a couple. Mark, I'm going to direct this one to you. You talked a little bit about businesses adapting to the situation. What do you see as the 3 biggest COVID-related adaptations by business that will be adopted long-term? And if anybody else wants to jump in on that too, you can do that as well.
That's hard to say. I mean, it really is hard to say. It's going to be interesting to see how it sorts out. One, I think that you don't realize it, but we immediately figured out our disaster recovery plans. So I mean, I was so impressed at how the business community went into a work from home environment really well. I think you will continue to see people have Microsoft Teams calls, Zoom calls, and I think you will see a certain amount of efficiency come from a better use of technology. I do think that we're going to change to some extent the way we use office space. I think that we were probably due for some design changes in office space, and I think this probably will change that. I also think Owen's point about his firm having a culture and that being, easy to deal with the transition to work from home. I think you're going to see business owners figure out how to manage a virtual workforce a little bit better. But I do believe you can't train, you can't implement real culture, winning culture. I mean, business is hard. If it were as easy as hiring people and sending them home, I mean, you might as well hire people from Brazil or robots or whatever. I mean, so business is hard. At least ours is, and we really, I think, so I think there might be some life cycle though to that. Where you're training people, then you send, once they get to a point where they understand the culture, understand what's going on, they might be able to work in a little bit more of a virtual environment. And then maybe after some amount of time, they come back and, share some of those experiences with others. So those are some of the things on my mind that I see sticking post-COVID.
Great, thank you. All right, Rob, this will be a question for you. What is the fiscal year 21 state revenue projection compared to fiscal year 20?
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, the state budget and local government budgets are directly correlated to overall economic activity, obviously tax revenue. So the state's budget is, and these are rough figures here, but the state's budget is about $30 billion. And 1/3 of that is general state revenue. So the other 2/3 come from federal sources and from fees and things like that. So out of that 1/3 of our $30 billion, we have to, we're looking at a reduction of about $1.3 billion out of that. And so that will be for fiscal 21. Generally, our overall general revenue for the state is projected about 6% down. So $1.3 billion is what we're looking to have to trim out of the state budget. And obviously that is going to affect all departments. It certainly is looking at impacts in economic development. But, and you've seen the governor announce some of these restrictions and withholds and reductions over the last couple of weeks. It's just the nature of where we're at. This COVID crisis has hit individual Missourians financially. It certainly hit businesses financially, and it's hitting government financially as well. So that's kind of where we're at, about $1.3 billion.
Great, thank you. Well, I don't see any other questions. So thank you to our panelists for joining us today. I feel very confident now that things are kind of headed in the right direction. Like somebody said at the beginning of this, we didn't know where we were going and when we'd ever come back to something similar to normal, but it sounds like we're headed in the right direction. So wanted to just announce a couple of things that we have coming up on June 25th. We're actually doing a webinar with the governor We've got 6 chambers involved, and so we'll be sending out information on that in the next day or two. So watch out for that. We'd love to have you join us. And then we are going to do our first in-person event on July 7th. I'm excited. We're going to do our morning coffee, morning mingle event outdoors at Faulkner's Ranch, and so encourage people to sign up for that as well. Kim, do you have some things coming up or anything that you want to share with the group?
We do. Next Thursday, the June 18th, we're doing our second virtual happy hour, and we're going to set it up a little bit differently where we've got some fun questions. So we learn a lot more about our attendees and our members, a little more about their personal lives. One thing that we've enjoyed doing all these Zoom meetings is seeing people's pets and homes and kids and grandkids. So we thought we kind of play on that idea a little bit. And then, as you said, the joint chamber lunch with the governor, 25th. And then I think our next morning connections, we're going to stay virtual through July. So our next morning connections will be July 8th.
Great. All right. Any last comments from our panelists?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Guys. We
Thank
really
you,
appreciate the time.
This
All
was
right.
great. Great information.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day.
Okay,
Appreciate
thanks.
your time.
Yeah, bye.